So welcome to the governors, to Philip, our Chief Executive, to my non-NED colleagues who are present. I think we've got an array of non-executive talent at the meeting this morning. A warm welcome also to our two new Upper East governors who started in post in November. So that's Michael Tebbett and Alison Fisher, and also our newly appointed governor from Surrey County Council, representing our colleagues in local government, Sinead Mooney. So hopefully, Sinead, you're online as well. It was lovely to meet you yesterday to prepare for the meeting. Welcome also to our other newly elected governors who are attending the meeting to observe the council, so they can be prepared for when they take up office in March of next year. So a warm welcome to them, and hopefully the meeting will just confirm your excitement to joining us and not put you off. So welcome to you. It's also a day to welcome new starters, and Julie Harris has joined as Assistant Company Secretary. So Julie, I think you're there. Can you give us a wave, please, so that your public can see you for future reference? So Julie is, those who haven't met Julie, Julie's now well and truly settling into post, and effectively the main role is to support the council so you can undertake your role effectively in holding me and non-executive colleagues to account for the running of the trust. And finally, welcome to any members of the public or staff and volunteer colleagues who have joined us. Just so everyone is aware, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, so there will be opportunity at the end of the meeting to ask questions on the business of the agenda, and also we do ask colleagues to remain on mute if you're not playing an active part of the meeting with your camera off, so as to preserve the precious bandwidth we have to exist with, so we can get through the meeting. So I think that's the house notices and the preparation, so we can now crack on into the main body of the meeting. So apologies for absence, please, Julie.
Yes, we have two apologies today, one being Was, and the other is, sorry about this, Howard Prescott. Rightio,
okay, we send them our best wishes. Moving on, we've got the minutes of the previous meeting and the action log and matters arising. Item 5021. First of all, are you able to accept the minutes as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Colleagues confirmed. Looking to the governors. You're content. I'll take silence as assent. So we will now accept the minutes. Thank you. The action log and any matters arising. Anything we need to bring up, Julie?
There are two actions. One with Tom and Laurie. Through their respective committees as appropriate to consider the data around the root cause of complaints related to crew attitude, which was up 59% of complaints as detailed in the June IPR. So over to you, Tom or Laurie.
Tom, do you want to pick that up?
I think Laurie, do you want to start as chairman of WWC, and I'll dip in either way.
Yeah, I mean, this is, we have a report coming to WWC on Thursday, and we might pick this up actually during the some comments I'll make about the WWC report anyway, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I'll pick it up in due course. Tom?
Yes, and just in terms of not just our trust, but generally across the NHS, I am picking up this sometimes is an indication of how stressed people are, and that is impacting behaviours. And clearly we need to look in our own organisation at what's happening. But I am seeing and hearing about, there is a very fractious relationship sometimes that we haven't seen before in the NHS between very stressed members of the public, patients, families, and NHS staff. So it's a really uncomfortable situation. But yes, we do intend through WWC to understand better what's going on in our organisation.
Yeah, we need I think a balance view, don't we? Because I think my impression is that our crews are arriving in situations because of delays. They're arriving to often quite difficult circumstances of people wanting to know where they've been, and they've been dealing with some usually in every case dealing with another, well, probably equally pressing call. But also we do know our crews diffuse a number of situations as well. So we need to sort of make sure this is kept in balance here regarding crew attitude, because like I said, they've got anecdotal evidence of how crews have calmed situations down and had universal praise from the public. So we need to understand the root cause of this, as we said, to keep a balance on this for sure.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to. We know our staff are under significant pressure at the moment. I see a hand raised. I'm not quite sure who it's from.
That's me, David.
Come in.
Philip.
Yeah, come in, Philip.
Thanks. I just want to back up that perception. My letter bag is full of letters praising the attitude of our staff and the care that they give, etc., despite the fact that that most of those letters start with "You were very, very slow to get to us," and I can't say just how often people are going the extra mile to defuse situations. So I think you're entirely right about the cause of this. It's started by the delay of care and the frustration that people are feeling all the way through the care system. I can't get hold of this, I can't get hold of that. I've ended up with the ambulance service, and then it's taken ages to get to me because I'm at the bottom end of the acuity scale, and the people who face it are the call takers in our EOCs and the frontline staff, who, when they arrive to someone who's been waiting for a long time, are meeting a justifiably angry family. So I want to just put on record my absolute pride in the way in which our people actually go about their daily business in this fashion.
Yeah, let's accept that, Phil. Absolutely well said. And at the same time, we've also got a duty of care to our staff, haven't we, in terms of making sure they're properly supported. I know that's the focus where Laurie will be coming from, the Workforce Committee, to make sure this organisation is doing all it can to support our frontline staff at a time of immense pressure in the system, as Tom has confirmed as well. Laurie, final word and we'll move on.
No, I was just going to say that. I mean, the staff well-being is a huge part of the agenda on Thursday, and I think maybe as part of that, we'll look just to make sure that staff aren't harried unduly because of the tense situation that Tom described. So we will pick that up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Any other matters arising or items on the action log, Julie?
Yes, one more. Council to receive update on a review of the effectiveness of the Trust's internal and external communications by end of 17-18 financial year.
Yeah, this has come across from another committee to us to this group recently. It's obviously predates just about everybody on the call, but there was a review done for another chief exec into the communications, external and internal. That review produced a report which I've been through with a fine-tooth comb, and my predecessor also went through with a fine-tooth comb, and then decided that actually the report wasn't what it was worth. It wasn't. It focused on the wrong things. But anyway, let's move forward, because that's 4 years ago. It was four and a bit years ago now. We have been taking a review of our entire, wider than internal and external comms, a wider review recently of all our corporate affairs. And because the system has changed. And the health system that we now operate in, with the ICSs becoming ICBs, becoming statutory bodies, means that as important as internal and external comms is a whole raft of other activities that we undertake in order to fit in and work with those other partners, and all of that is badged under corporate affairs. So we've created a new group called the Partnership Group, and that's adding expertise, but also information that's new. So it's growing. We'll bring all of that into one. I'll come back to comms in a second, because I know governors have a particular aspiration. But in terms of the broader corporate affairs work that was being taken through WWC, but actually it's so broad that we decided that actually it's a board matter, and so we're taking it back to board via our strategy advisory group, and that's how we'll take it forward, and we'll report back as we progress that. But it's an ongoing piece of work. On the comms side, I have seen and I do hear governors saying to us, we need to be louder in the press about the pressure that we're under, and please don't call the ambulance service, but and do that. We have got a winter campaign going on now, but actually nothing that we do will get anywhere near the coverage that some of the national press are getting. So that's where David and I have been working to get into the front pages of the national press, and sometimes the inner pages, stories about just how busy the service is, and hopefully that has a much greater effect than a local ambulance service doing it through social media. Certainly has a much bigger hit, and so we're not just doing that. We are going on with our winter campaign at the moment, and that's a planned campaign that has started and is rolling through the next 6 weeks.
I mean, just on that, just for clarification of that, I mean, I, for instance, in the last 3 months have met with the Prime Minister, with other members of a small group of ambulance service leaders, met with the Prime Minister's health advisors in a separate meeting for the ambulance sector with number 10 to explain about the pressures in the service. Philip and I hosted a visit from Sir Andrew Morris, who is currently the chair of the NHS Management Board, known to some as the chief executive at Frimley for many years with distinction before his retirement, but he's now the senior non-executive in the NHS, and he visited our headquarters a few weeks ago and was given a very comprehensive briefing by Philip and members of our staff. So we are doing all we can to raise this matter, and Philip and I have met or given opportunity for every MP in Kent, Surrey and Sussex in the areas served by CCAM to meet with us. Many of them took up that invitation and we met with them and briefed them. Some of them sent their representatives in terms of their researchers and however, but nevertheless we've given that opportunity to every single MP, and Philip, I think, hosted 4 meetings with them in the last month to 6 weeks, and gave them a very comprehensive briefing of where we are at CCAM and where the ambulance sector was and where the health service was, quite frankly, and they listened politely, and we were very clear where we felt the situation, where the pressures were. So we are doing our best to make sure our voice is heard in an appropriate way. And also there's been the national report on ambulance on harm caused by weights, which again Philip and I were heavily involved in its launch to ensure that came out as a balanced piece of work that showed there were pressures in the system, not just pressures in A&E departments. So that work has come out as well. So we are doing all we can to manage upwards and keep everybody aware of what's happening in the NHS. So can we now move on, if we may? We've got the annual members meeting to receive and approve. So colleagues that were there at the annual members meeting, which once again was virtual, which is disappointing, but that's the reality of the life of where we find ourselves currently. Can we accept those minutes, please? Thank you, Marcia. I can see you nodding. I think you were there, so we'll take that as approval. Let's move on now, please, to the 5121, the Chief Executive's report. We've got a maximum of 20 minutes for this. Good.
Thank you, David. So I'll start with, I won't go through the report because you will all had a chance to read it, but I will go through some of the updates to it, because obviously it's a fast-moving situation, and for instance, it doesn't even mention Omicron, because we hadn't heard of it when I wrote that. So I'll give you updates where I think they are required. So firstly, on the disease itself, the way I read this is that this is we are in the middle of a wave, and it's a long flat wave, and it'll go on right over Christmas and into the new year, and the unknown is how much of that wave is going to be Delta, how much of it is going to be Omicron. But the good money, the hot money, seems to be on Omicron taking the majority of the care. Now, we still don't know what effect that's going to have on people, and importantly, we don't know what effect that's going to have on our staff. The important thing for us, therefore, is just to keep vaccinating, making sure our people are safe from the worst ravages. But there is also no indication that that's a nightmare scenario. It's just it's another variant. But I think we all have to just sit on our hands and wait for the science to have time, or the scientists to have time to work out exactly what Omicron does and how it behaves, and therefore how we have to react to it. So we need to stay nimble, and there will be changes to guidance, and we expect that over the next month and a half as people get better sighted on Omicron. In terms of performance, I'll start with national performance. Last time, I can't remember last time we met what I said about national performance, but since we last met, pretty much all the ambulance trusts in the UK have been on REAP level 4. That's unheard of, never happened before, and it's a real national issue. And that's why it's getting such attention in the national press. So just to give you a picture of that, I was very worried during October about our performance, because I'm the chief exec and it keeps me awake at night. Not the performance numbers, the impact that we're having on our patients. That's indicated by the performance level. So when I was quite worried when I was looking at a comparator that our performance was so bad that we might be standing out. When the numbers actually came through, for category 2, which is 70% now of our patients, we were the best performing trust, large trust in the country, and that's a really sobering thought. So I'm not saying that because I'm proud of it. Our performance was still not nowhere near what our patients deserve, but there's the factors as I'll come to are national ones, and they are all to do with the feedback from the last 18 months. So going into the performance, what are the two key factors that are affecting our performance? The first is demand. It is not, as some people think, a massive numbers game. So we get lots more calls than we expect to have at this time of the year, but that's only translating to the same number of patients that we actually have to go and see face to face. It's not the number of the demand, it's the acuity that I was just talking about. So when we started ARP, the system was designed to run at about 55 to 60% Cat 1s and Cat 2s. And over the 3 years that it's been running, that number has crept up a bit. And so we were pre-pandemic running about 61% Cat 1s and Cat 2s. In October, it was 74% Cat 1s and Cat 2s. And of course, what that means is that we are, because we treat those so much more seriously than Cat 3s and 4s in terms of urgency, you can see that makes our whole system much less efficient, because you keep continually diverting from Cat 3s and 4s to the Cat 2s and the Cat 1s. And of course, the Cat 1s, we send more than one resource to. So every time you go up a percentage point in your Cat 1s, in terms of demand, that's a 4% increase in the utility of people. So that's the demand problem. And then the supply problem is how can we get enough crews out to meet that additional demand. And our problem with that is the most significant problem is staff sickness. So the greatest change that we've seen in staff sickness is a significant increase in stress and anxiety, and a significant number of those of those people who are reporting stress and anxiety sickness are translating directly into PTSD. And this is all about the situation that we've been living in at home as well as at work for over the last 18 months, and the general pressures that everybody's feeling, and the pressure that the current situation for the whole NHS is feeling. So that's the issue that we're grappling with. We are giving good care. I keep meeting people who come back from bouts of sickness, mental health with mental health issues, who say that the care that they were given via our wellbeing hub was excellent. And I'm delighted to hear that, and so we're reinforcing that. But these aren't quick things to come back from. It's not like a twisted ankle where you can be back at work within a week. This takes time for people to get better, and we need to let them get better and not pressurize them into coming back to work too soon, because then it'll just happen again. And it's the same with leave. We haven't been discouraging people taking leave because that will also, if we discourage the leave taking, that will translate into additional sickness. So I'll stop on that. And I just
can I just interrupt? Sorry, for new members who joined us today, could you just explain what REAP and ARP are?
Sorry.
And also, when you use the word resources, people may not quite relate to the fact is that means vehicles, or vehicles with crews. Yeah. So if you could just translate that for people, that would be really helpful, I think. Just
please.
New members.
Yeah, forgive me. REAP is it's our action plan. So all the ambulance service is a national system, and it's a measurement of how much pressure we're under. And there are 4 levels of REAP, and each time you go up a level, you take extraordinary actions in order to recognise and to combat the effects of the level of pressure that you're under. There are only 4 levels. And normally ambulance trusts hover between REAP 1 and REAP 2. REAP 2 when they're busy, REAP 1 when they're normal. And to have all the ambulance services on REAP 4 is just extraordinary. So the sort of actions that you take when you're on REAP 4 are stopping training, making sure that people who stop a raft of non-essential meetings, you get your response capable managers who normally have jobs in the in one of our corporate departments back onto the road as often as you can. You deploy team leaders onto the road rather than doing their day jobs. So they're extreme things that we're doing in order to provide additional staff on the road. ARP, the Ambulance Response Programme, came in about 3.5 years ago, and it is how we measure our performance in time. So it sets all the targets. These targets are not time targets in order to save money. They are time targets which translate to the acceptable level of patient care according to the science that was behind it. I think I've covered that. So moving on, the systems, I call them ICSs, integrated care systems, which become legal entities in April. Let's just see how they're doing, because it isn't just the ambulance service who are struggling. So last month, all of our systems went into their version of REAP, which they call Opal, and they've been in Opal 4, which is their highest level. Some of them have now moved back to Opal 3, because they're doing what they call, or what we normally call perfect weeks. They're doing exercises in order to empty out the hospitals of patients who are fit for discharge across their systems, and that's happening this week and next week. But I've just mentioned what their core problem is. Far too many of our hospitals have got people who are fit for discharge, but can't find the care packages in the community, and so they're occupying hospital beds when they shouldn't be, and don't need to be. And that's the single greatest contributor to the hospitals issue. Although their demand has gone up significantly because there are far more people walking into hospitals and being sent by other healthcare services. The ambulance rate is a tiny bit lower than it has been in previous years. So we're doing our bit about not filling the hospitals up, and our crews are doing really well at that. But their general demand into EDs is really, really significant. And that leads to hospital handover delays. And you will have all have seen, I suspect, the press around the report that we led on, but under the guidance of ACE, we inspired it and into the harm caused by hospital handover delays. This was in order to answer the question that we kept getting asked as an ambulance sector. Have you got proof that there is harm being caused by these hospital handover delays? So it was an effort to answer that. It did that, and since then, or as soon as they'd seen the draft of that report, the NHS from the very top all the way down through the regional commands and control centres have given very, very clear instructions to ICSs that they do not have hospital handover delays. And it is being taken very seriously, but it's not an easy thing to fix. So we continue to have them. Normally in our patch, there are 2 hospitals that queue all year, Medway, Maritime, and this year it's been Brighton. But the pressure is now so great on the hospitals that it's happening to all of the hospitals at one time or another. Normally our best hospital for not having queues outside is St Richard's, and that's been our worst for 2 weeks of the last 4. And Frimley, which used to be really good, also having significant problems. So it's affecting all the hospitals, and it's caused by that blockage of not being able to get patients out, so you can't get patients from ED into the hospital. So that's where the systems are. I talked about vaccinations, and it's mentioned in the report, but just as a bit of an update, we're now at 62% of our staff have had the booster vaccine. Our internal programme finishes on the 17th of December. We're only licensed to do it up until then, and it doesn't look like that licence will be extended. After that point, then people who when they're ready to get their vaccines, they'll be called into other NHS vaccine centres to get their vaccinations. Just a quick update on the critical incident that we had on the 17th of November. I'm not going to go through the incident in any sense. I just thought that as a piece of assurance. We have an externally led, by our own choice, that is an externally led lessons learnt activity ongoing. We're taking that really seriously, and that's why we've got the national EPRR leads running it, and that started in earnest with the evidence taking, and we'll come up with some firm recommendations. We should have that in the next two or 3 weeks done, and that will I think show that we did incredibly well to recover what was a really difficult situation. We've identified the root cause and make sure that root cause can't happen again. But again, I want to point out to everybody that the effort that our call centre staff, EOCs, and 111 went to move on to paper for such a long time was extraordinary. And there were some Herculean efforts on behalf of our people during that that really difficult 24 hours. On the positive side, great to do the staff awards. They're always humbling. They're always, it's an evening of just being in awe of the people that we're privileged to work alongside. So I was delighted we were able to do that in person this time, as opposed to on air. We had to do a sort of a mix because of COVID restrictions. But it worked really well. So I want to thank Janine and her team who run those on everybody's behalf. They were great evenings, and everybody has given us really good feedback on them. Pleased to see a new set of volunteers out and about around the trust, working alongside our staff wellbeing effort, and this is something that we are investing significant amounts of the charitable funds to, and quite rightly so. But that's good. We talked about our efforts about updating our MPs, etc., etc. We're also meeting, David and I, with all the new system leaders, because they've just been appointed. So these are the ICS chief executives and the ICS chairs. These are going to be really influential people for CCAM and very important to our futures. So we're making a real effort to get into their thinking early on, and I think that's going well. I'm going to finish by saying that on the report we note our new Director of Quality and Nursing arriving, but there's no name in there. I'm delighted to tell you that Robert Nichols, who's known as Rob Nichols, will be joining us on the 15th of February, and the current deputy will be standing in from the end of the year till he arrives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Comprehensive, and we obviously give our best wishes to Bethan, who departs on the 18th of December, I think, for after a distinguished service here at CCAM. So we wish you well. So, colleagues, comprehensive report from the Chief Executive about what's going on around the Trust. Questions? Any questions, please, from the Council? Whether staff governance in particular got any feedback? Marcia, you've taken the cue. You've taken the cue. Well done.
I wasn't going to ask any questions. There's not really a question, to be honest. It's just to say thank you for the COVID booster program, because recently I realized how difficult it would have been for me to get my booster. So I am very pleased and very happy that I was able to have the booster through CCAM. So thank you for
yes, apparently one of the few ambulance. I don't think any other ambulance trust has been entrusted with looking after this precious vaccine because of the various arrangements. So our team have done a brilliant job in getting us able to give this out. So thank you for that. Well, that's passed on, Marcia. Harvey.
It was simply to say thank you for the information on the comms. Thank you also for the meeting that we had with David, which was very useful. I think one of the things that we might benefit from in the future is a bit more insight into the background effort that's going on by the board, even if that has to remain, if you like, sub judice. It's useful for us to be in the picture of the efforts that you're making, so thank you for that. And I think the only other thing I wanted to say was thank you for everybody who was involved in dealing with the critical incident, because clearly people performed remarkably during that time, and well done to all of them.
Thank you, Harvey. We Philip and I strike it's a narrow line between public accountability and ensuring that the NHS family work collectively behind the scenes. So it's never an easy path to walk. But I have to say to you, the balance of myself and my non-executive colleagues is for absolute openness, and we're only extremely discreet on matters of national security or staff welfare, staff matters. Quite frankly, the feeling of the non-executives in particular is we will say it as it is, providing that's objective, balanced and fair. We'll make sure that it's important that people understand where we are, but also the extraordinary efforts of our staff to keep patients safe, people safe in the southeast of England. It's not an easy time. Thank you for that. I think, can I see Alison? Hand? Can I see Alison Fisher asking a question? Maybe having some technical difficulty. Obviously not receiving. So any other questions at all on the Chief Executive report? Perhaps you can get a message to Alison if she has it. Maybe it's just if there is a question she wants to ask, we can ask it later in the meeting. I don't want to put her off, but I can't. She's obviously not receiving us, so I can't get through, I think. Can we move on then, please, to the item 5221, the membership recruitment and engagement report, and have Brian, please, Brian Chester, chair of the Membership Development Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. You just stole my opening introduction of myself, but actually I have to say that in terms of engagement with non-staff members this year, it's been difficult, if not impossible, and we can see in the report that numbers have dropped slightly. As you heard earlier, the annual members meeting took place for a second year online, and in fact that was not without its technical challenges on the day either. And MDC, there's a fairly copious report which I'd urge particularly our newer members to read and get a flavour of. But just in summary, we shared reports from the various groups that actually make up and report into the MDC, which is the Inclusion Hub Advisory Group, the Patient Experience Group, Staff Engagement Advisory Group, which I think was recently renamed as well, and also had an update on the work of the Community Resilience Team. And again, these updates are available in detail. We probably the most recent and the item that caused perhaps the widest debate in any MDC meeting that I chaired was actually when we had a presentation from the on public communications from the head of communications. That generated an awful lot of debate. And some fairly candid comments actually from members of staff. I have to say I would echo Harvey's thanks to the chair and to Michael for the conversation that we had following that, and I commend you for what we have achieved in terms of actually bringing those issues forward. We ended up by really effectively having to defer the membership action plan, which is very much about getting into and meeting members for another year. We did actually manage to have a meeting which connected governors and board members with their local Make Ready groups. And we'll endeavour to do more of that in the coming year when we can. I would say that as a recently re-elected governor, I was much taken with the quality both by numbers and ability of governors who stood for election. So I'm looking forward, and having met some of those new governors actually last Thursday down at the Brighton Make Ready Centre, I really do look forward to the contribution. And we, on the day, we encourage those members to become active members, both of the MDC, Membership Development Committee, and the GDC, and they've all got copies of the acronym, so we don't need to translate that, as you know, Chair. And I think just to close, because I know we're actually short of time, this problem with COVID in terms of meeting face-to-face doesn't go away, but I would like to particularly commend the IHAG group, along with the members of staff, who were endeavouring in the first place to actually have a Christmas physical get together for governors, etc. But with the innovation that they've actually shown with an online party piece, in which I know you're going to take place, Chair, and with the associated goodies that might actually go with it. So I think with all that's going on, with all that staff are having to cope with, and we're very conscious of that, to manage to arrange that, they're to be commended. And on that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing the seasonal spirit, Brian. I have to say, I have been in the loft to find out my most favourite Christmas present of all time, ready for the event. So I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Good.
So, questions, please, of Brian. Harvey?
It's not really a question for Brian.
Excuse me, we're getting an echo. It sounded like gas at the moment. Can we just mute our mics, please?
Is that
Harvey,
better?
over to you.
Yeah, one of the things that came up at the GDC, in fact, was relating to the patient experience group, which is something that's discussed at the MDC. And I know that Howard Pescott, who can't be here today, wanted to raise at this meeting to seek assurance from NEDS that the work of the patient experience group is supporting the NHS framework for improving patient experience. And he particularly asked if that could be raised at this meeting. So it's probably the best place for it. You might want notice of that question.
Yeah, well, perhaps I noticed Liz was going to comment. Perhaps Liz, could under Tom's item, under the QPS later in the meeting, could we comment on the patient? I know that's something which the patient experience is particularly exercised by non-executive colleagues regarding delays, etc. So we'll come back on the QPS and Liz will add to Tom's answer. That'd
be fine.
Yeah, thank you for that. And can we conclude the membership recruitment unless there's any other answers? Thank you. Can we briefly go back to the previous item? Alison managed to get a question through, Philip, about have we been involved in, or has there been any talk yet of what an integrated governing body will look like, the new ICB, as it were? And I think the answer is broadly yes, isn't it? So do you want to give a brief answer? You're on mute.
Yeah, I've just put something in the chat. So we've been the governance of the ICBs. We are discussing it, and we've gone as far as, you know, chair, chief exec. We've agreed the permanent members of the boards in most of our ICSs. And we've also, in about half of them, agreed the level of non-executive director presence on the boards. But we haven't got as far as discussing governors yet. And I'm not sure that I don't know. Peter may be able to help me out here, but governors they come with foundation trust status, and because of the ICBs aren't going to be of that status, they don't need to have them. So they're all discussing different ways in which they can get public representation into the systems, but it might not be. By having something as formal as governors.
Yeah, thank you. And they've just commenced the recruitment of non-executive directors. That's commenced. Okay, can we move on, please, from that item? Move on to back onto the agenda, and looking at the Governor Development Committee report, which I think, Harvey, you're going to stand in for our lead governor today for this item.
Yes. The minutes for both the meetings that have been held are in the pack. I'm assuming that everybody has read them. For the newer governors, then this committee really is around how we as governors can do a better job. It's either developing us as individuals or developing how we do things within CCAM or outside. and it has a number of things. The ones I'd particularly commend to new governors would be things like observing board committees. This is wonderfully rewarding. It gives us the opportunities to see our NEDs in action. And of course, one of the things that we have to do periodically is contribute towards the appraisals of NEDs. And so it gives us an opportunity to not only see them in action, but also to sort of make a note of the things that we would want to comment on later on. It also gives us the opportunity to look at things like training, what training we should get, and there's a number of things there. We've talked in the recent meetings about the induction that new governors are going to get. And I would commend anybody who is a governor to attend the GDC. It's really useful. But unless there's any questions, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Harvey. Very helpful. So, any points of clarification for Harvey? Okay, thank you for that. Indeed. So that's item 5321 and 5421. Thank you. We will receive. Can we move on then to the integrated performance reports? Now, this is a sorry, have I missed the? I thought you covered governor activities and queries, Harvey, or anything else?
It's very short.
Yeah.
All I would say is that there's a list of the ones that have been raised recently. The thing that I think stands out is the sheer range of things across which we question, and that it varies. Some are following up on previous things, some are ongoing, some are suggestions, some are about process, some are about incidents. So it's up to governors what they raise, but I think this is a good example of a very good range of questions. Again, I would encourage all the new governors to ask as many questions as is appropriate. The one I would just pick out is, I think that over recent times, there's been a question often asked about the role of CFRs, and I believe that now action is being taken for CFRs to be assisting on some of the ambulances. And I particularly praise a colleague who's just stood down, Jeff Kempster, for keeping this firmly in front of the Council of Governors and board. That's all I've got to say, unless there's any questions on the report.
Thank you, Harvey. Any questions of Harvey on the activities and queries report? Thank you. We received that with thanks. Thank you. Just to say, go back to item 5521, the report in your pack, which is the integrated performance report, which is a very detailed report, and that's there to bring it. We've just mentioned it now to bring it to your attention, and my colleague non-executives will, as they take you through each committee, will refer you to that report, so you can base your questions based on the report and what my colleagues will now say to you regarding the performance of each of the committees. We can then hopefully you can gain assurance that we are in touch with the business of the trust. So we move on then to the board assurance committees, the first, we've got the minutes of the performance committee before you, which is newly established, and Howard Goodborn is the chair of that committee. Howard, is there anything you wish to highlight in your report, please, to the council?
Obviously, yeah, as you mentioned, it's the first committee, so we've got the two meetings we've had so far, one in August and one in November. Obviously, we looked at initially we looked at the terms of reference and the purpose of the committee to focus on the performance in a more granular level of detail. I think Philip has covered quite comprehensively the sort of current position in terms of performance. and it is challenged, but as he says, relative to the national position, we're okay, certainly on the C2 category, as he mentioned. In terms of the assurance levels trying to be achieved on performance, I think we were assured regarding, as it says in the report, regarding the overall governance and structure and understanding of the issues. But obviously, for obvious reasons, the actual performance is challenged, and we were not assured regarding the sort of short-term actual performance. But as has been said, it's sort of across the piece in terms of the national picture. So yeah, sort of an overall balanced picture on performance. I'll open it up for any questions, really.
Thank you, Howard. Colleagues, clearly performances are the most pressing matter at the moment in terms of the day-to-day management of the trust. So, any particular questions, Marcia?
The 111 call answer performance is quite poor at the moment, and the IPR clearly shows that. What shocked me the most was the graph about the funding gap that exists. So obviously we all hear about how the NHS is underfunded, but for me that graph was a really eye-opener. So I suppose my question to the NEDs is, I know that CCAM can do so much to address that funding gap, but are the NEDs assured that that CCAM is doing all that it can to address that funding gap?
Yes, on that specific point, there is some good news that we can report, and that is that the additional volume on CAS 111 compared to the original plan, that has resulted in extra funding. That's relatively recent news over the last month or so. So that's very positive, and I think that's about 6.8 million, as I recall. So a significant extra funding for the CAS 111 specifically, and that's really positive. I think the thing that then remains outstanding is then next year. So as we'll come on to see later, there are considerable financial challenges going forward, but it is very good news in terms of the funding for CAS 111 in the current year, because we've recently received that extra funding. Significant.
Thank you. And I think, if I may, through you, Howard, to fill in, we've also been recruiting some additional staff with some extra funds we've had from the centre. So we've had some success in increasing our headcount.
And on top of that, I should add, on the 999s, we've also received some extra funding for winter, 4.3 million, which has been very positive in terms of certainly getting extra people on the phone lines on the 9s as well. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to back up what Howard was saying. The extra funding was welcome, but it isn't. There are three lines. There's a line that says this is what we were originally contracted to do. The 6.8 takes us above that by 6.8 million to a line that we agreed was probably the demand that was going to come some time ago. But unfortunately, demand has continued to grow beyond that. So we are still not funded for the level of activity that we're seeing in 111, although we are 6.8 million better funded than we were a month ago. So it's qualified good news, not outrageous good news. The 4.3 million, as Howard rightly says, is being spent on 999, and that's what it was specifically ring-fenced for. So we can't use that for 111, but we are dual training people. And so when the 999 pressure it goes off, we can use some of the EOC call takers to help out 111, because they'll be dual trained. At the moment, both systems are under great pressure, so we're not doing that so much. It's a great point, Marcy.
Thank you. That's important information to share with the public and in your wider membership about the way that the executives are working really hard to make our workforce as flexible as possible in very difficult circumstances. So we are doing our very best to meet demand. So I think that's a positive development. Any other questions for Howard as chair of performance? I hope you'll take assurance the fact the board have got a renewed focus on performance. We always were focused on performance matters, but you know, it brings appropriate attention to how we're responding to the needs of our patients. At the same time, we've got another separate meeting to look at how well we're spending the money in doing that. So I think it's important we keep both in equal view, and Howard's doing that with some expertise. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on, please, to the Workforce and Wellbeing Committee. Laurie, is there anything you wanted to say as chair, please, to introduce the report?
Everything's a bit parochial, but if you, I don't know, you may hear that several trees opposite my house, so that's what you might hear in the background. No, not really. I think because we cancelled a WWC a while ago, we seem to have got a bit out of sync. So a lot of the issues that are raised in the escalation report are coming to a WWC meeting on Thursday. So I think that a lot of the stuff that we're concerned about will actually be reviewed and refreshed then. I think the only thing I'd like to say is that in terms of there's a continuing trend in terms of HR processes. The HR team, this is in relation to things like expenses and personnel files and driving license, they really seem to have got that under control now. And also to say that the performance indicators we were using to look at the performance of HR are now moving on to the IPR, the integrated performance indicator for the board. So the board is able to see how well HR are doing in terms of their processes. In terms of issues that are coming up, I just wanted, there's a couple that I think might bring Governor's attention to. One is the executive have initiated a major review of health and well-being and what we're doing to help support our people in these difficult times, and that review is being conducted externally, so it's a really proper, thorough review, and we're getting a paper on the design of that, not the results obviously, coming to us on Thursday. Tom, as our well-being person on the board, I just wondered if you wanted to say anything about that. Is that okay?
Yes, sure. Thanks. So there is a lot of work going on around the well-being of our people. I'm very assured about that. And there's a group that Ali chairs as HR director that I sit in on as well-being guardian. That last week we were discussing all the different elements of the support for our staff's well-being, our colleagues' well-being across the organisation. And what we're hoping to do is to bring all of that to the full board actually in due course. But we're reporting to WWC about that later this week, Laurie. But there is a lot of stuff going on, and I think as Philip alluded to earlier, we're not necessarily as good as we might be about saying this is what we're providing, because there is so much there, things I didn't even know about. So I'm really heartened by that. And assured that well-being is at front and centre of our work as a board.
Yeah, and perhaps just to say, I mean, I was really impressed in those discussions that we're not just talking about what we do in the well-being hub. We're actually, the executive are looking much wider at how the staff relate to the organisation in general. And I think that's a very mature way of doing it. The second thing I wanted to pick up, David, was about our learning and development plan. Director of Ops, Emma Williams, and Head of OD, Vet Brian, have undertaken a major piece of work looking at the training and development needs of all of our staff over a 3-year period. This is really important for us, and I think it should make sure that the Trust maintains the best possible balance between service delivery and abstractions, horrible word, but it means taking away people from service in the front line, between service delivery and clinical development, management development, and perhaps a bit forgotten in CCAM till now, career development. So that's an important piece of work, major piece of work that's coming to us. The third one was about clinical education strategy. And here, I mean, people call them deep dives, which is a bit of a cliche, but this is really a deep dig that Fiona and her team have done in relaying the foundations on which clinical education and career progression in the trust is built. It's not perfect. There are still some teething problems which we're following up in WWC, but I think that's going to be a really significant shift in how well the trust performs and how comfortable, how we develop the people we have working for us. I don't know, Tom, if you want to raise anything on that, because you're a bit of a ClinEd expert, but is that okay? I mean, that paper's coming to us, isn't it?
Yes, and you know, and I've met Subo, and I have been down to Hayward Heath to meet with the consultant paramedic for clinical education, and very impressed actually at the direction of travel and what's been achieved just in a few months. Or clearly more to do, but you know, we're definitely going in the right direction. Yes,
Fiona and Ashley Richardson is the guy that's done a lot of the digging work I mentioned. The final one I think I'd like to talk about is just FTSE. The WWC were concerned about the frequency in which the freedom to speak up process was being used, perhaps on employee relations issues, and this was a bit of a concern. It's interesting that we found that perhaps we weren't as much out of step with other trusts as we thought, which is quite interesting, but just because we compare with others doesn't mean to say we shouldn't really look into it. And we were worried, if you remember, that it was about a poor employee relations process, we thought, and that was pushing people into freedom to speak up. I think it's worth saying that it's not really a reflection on how we manage the freedom to speak up process and all the excellent work that Kim Blakeburn is doing, but it's probably about the quality of the employee relations deep within the trust. And it's good to see that the paper, I've seen a draft of it that's coming to us on Thursday, is looking at that to change the whole climate of those relationships, the culture, if you will, to ensure that employee relations issues are dealt with properly and amicably at a local level, rather than resorting to this rather extreme measure of the freedom to speak up process. Those are the things that I think are coming up that we ought to be alerted to. The only other thing I'd say, a bit as Harvey mentioned earlier, is that it's really good to see governors coming to the meeting. I think they really help, and particularly the briefing I do with them before, and then most particularly afterwards, I find really helpful to understand how my bosses are thinking about things. So given the issues here, it may be that other governors want to join our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. It's good to hear the focus on staff welfare, particularly, and as well as education, which is two key issues we very much at the forefront of the board's mind. Colleagues, any questions or comments on business of the Workforce Committee? Marcia.
Sorry, me again.
Marcia, I know it's your last meeting, but keep going.
I don't have a question as such, though I would welcome the Ned's comments. David Hammond mentioned during the last council meeting the new ways of working work stream. And to date, support staff have still not received an update on this. And for some of the staff, it's still not very clear what that actually means. A couple of weeks ago, it was announced on the staff bulletin that the trust was seeking comments on the agile working procedure. I personally spoke to people that are a lot senior than me that didn't even know that this was out for consultation. So for me, that raises I have serious doubts that managers are actually able to support and encourage staff to have their say on something that could potentially have quite a big impact on their working lives. Support staff have approached me, even support staff that I don't actually know, to say that they feel forgotten by the trust. So I guess I would urge the Neds on your next WWC meeting and or other meetings to, when discussing and seeking assurance of staff well-being, to also consider this group staff. and to challenge the trust on how it communicates with non-operational staff. I think the last thing we want is us versus them culture. And at the moment, I am starting to hear things like, oh, they only care about this particular group of staff. And really, that's not what we want. I don't necessarily believe in that, but I can understand why it happens. Sorry, I waffle about a little bit, but I hope I got my point across.
No, Marcia, that wasn't waffle. That was very eloquently put and appropriately put, if I may say so. And one of which we are, my non-executive colleague at the moment, we are very conscious of, particularly in terms of we always talk of the frontline staff, but behind every front line, there's a support unit, there's support staff, and the staff, many of whom are working from home. And we do need to ensure that in our narrative and in our actions, we don't forget.
Yeah, and language is important. And when people mention operational staff, 111 EOC, but do not mention non-operational staff, that gets heard.
Absolutely, and I think we do need to be sensitive to that, and we will make sure we encourage that. This is again, it's a leadership issue in terms of employee relations. It sounds a bit vague. It's about your boss and how the boss speaks to you, and are you feeling welcome, and that's something really important. So, Laurie, I think this is in the mind of the WWC. Agile working.
Well, it's interesting, Marcia. I think that is a really, really important point. It's so easy to talk about people actually providing services out there in the field and to forget the others. I'm going to leave the stuff around nimble working to Philip. This is more his area, but I think I'm just thinking about some of the things that are coming up in terms of clinical education. One of the things that has worried us in WWC is how separate that is from the rest of the education, training and development process, where some of your support staff and corporate functions actually work. And I just wanted to reassure you that actually one of the things we're looking at is how you bring clinical education much closer into what then would be a mainstream, rather than treating it as sort of special and, dare I say, superior. The other thing is that when I mentioned this heroic piece of work around training and development needs over the longer term, I just wanted to reassure you that that is for all staff, including those who, I mean, the support staff is the right term, even that's sort of demeaning in a way, but those working in corporate functions and other functions, it includes all of that as well. So in those two respects, I think we're okay for now, but I really take your point, and I think WWC will be looking to make sure that we don't overemphasize our interest in just the clinical workforce, important though they are.
They are very important, and obviously, my colleagues in EOC 111 and out there on the road are facing extraordinary challenge, and yes. I do know that. So I'm not, it's not like about choosing sides or anything. I'm just highlighting a problem that I see happening, and I can see that it's happening.
And the point is really well made, and you can, I hope you continue with making it and keeping an eye on how well we do in maintaining that balance.
Yeah. Thank you. Tom, you wish to comment?
Yeah, just to follow on from that. I mean, Marcia, every conversation I have around well-being, it's about all of our colleagues across the trust, across our organisation. And when I'm having specific conversations, I often say, I reflect what you just said. Our focus on field ops, EOC 111, really important. But what about everybody else? What about all the people working from home for all these months who are finding that really stressful? What about the people investigating, managing serious incidents, dealing with complaints? So take assurance from me that this is definitely something that we recognise it's for all of our colleagues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you. And my colleagues will give that appropriate focus. Well, they are giving you focus, but they'll make sure it's a renewed vigour of the important items that you raise. So thank you, Marcia. If there are no other questions and comments, can we move on to quality and patient safety? And Tom, as the chair of the committee, do you want to talk to this? Anything you want to say initially?
Yes, thank you, David. And we've got 2 escalation reports. I wasn't at the November meeting, I'm afraid, because I was ill, but Subo may want to come in when I give the highlights of both. You'll see a focus and assurance around harm reviews, particularly in these particularly difficult times. There's an enormous amount of work going on behind the scenes to review thousands of cases of patients to assess, whether any of the circumstances we're in are causing harm. The serious harm seems to be, and we had this reported at board last week, in the single figures of thousands of records, patient incidents reviewed. So that's we have a really robust process on that. And in the November meeting, clearly the learning from those harm reviews was a big feature through which we were able to take assurance. The serious incident reviews, you will also have remembered, we talked about this perhaps, I think, at the last Council of Governors, and the issue of cluster SIs, so-called cluster serious incidents. I have been in touch with Bethan in the run-up to today about this, just to be clear that the duty of candour applies to every serious incident where a patient, where things may not have gone as we would have liked for individual patient. And in terms of reporting back to coroners, under the new patient safety incident reporting framework, which is just being rolled out across the NHS, and learning from experience from London Ambulance Service, who've been doing this a little bit longer, both cluster SI reports and individual patient reports go to coroners. So I know people had questions about that last time. The other key thing was key skills. So at the November meeting, there was assurance from the Director of Operations around the key skills programme, because we were anxious that our colleagues weren't managing to get their key skills updates. And you'll see the report there about the enormous amount of work that has gone in from our executive colleagues to ensure that we have a key skills programme that is proportionate, that is manageable with everything else we've got to do. And the third thing is public access defibrillators. So across those two meetings, you'll have seen there was a discussion in the September meeting about public access defibrillators and the challenges we faced in assurance that those owned by the trust that CCAM were responsible for, that we knew they were rescue ready, so-called, and the enormous, again, I keep using the term enormous amount of work because there has been an enormous amount of work going on to ensure that where CCAM owns a defibrillator, is responsible for it in our communities, that we know that is ready if a patient needs it. So that's phase one of that programme. Phase two, of course, is going to be working out all the other defibrillators around our region and how we can get a similar assurance. And that'll probably be through the British Heart Foundation circuit scheme. So those were the three things that I just wanted to raise there. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tom. Colleagues, any? Marcia?
Sorry. On the public access defibrillators thing, I was obviously pleased to know that obviously all our pad sites are rescue ready. That my only question is, are the NEDs assured that there is now a process in place, like an adequate process in place to maintain these sites, so we won't have the problem again? So, in 2 years' time, we won't find ourselves in a position that, oh my God, what happened? Is that something that you're looking into it, or is that something that is already in place?
I don't know from November's meeting, but my assumption is that all these will be registered on the British Heart Foundation circuit going forward. I know those conversations are going on, and the whole point of that is every public access defibrillator, whichever organisation owns them, will be on that national register, and there will be prompts periodically if a defibrillator hasn't recently been checked.
Right. So CCAM would be part of that. So that's how you will get your assurance.
Yes, that's how. But again, final decisions on. I know the medical director has been encouraging the public to register defibrillators. That the final formal position of the trust in terms of the circuit for the devices that the trust owns. I don't know the answer to that yet, and I don't know whether Philip might be able to elucidate.
I'm happy to bring this up again. It's fine. It's something that I've got really interested in, and we all know.
Can I suggest we send you a written answer? We send you a note.
Sure.
That's fine. Thank you.
It's an important question, and we want to ensure that it's a matter of public safety as well. So we want to make sure that we're doing all we can here. So we'll make sure we get a note on that, please. If I can actually fill into action that would be very helpful. Thank you.
And Suba, did you want to add anything? I've paraphrased 2 meetings.
That's great, Tom. I just wanted to add one other thing. I think Philip's already updated on the critical incident. So just to assure governors that we will see a further report on that in terms of patient harm. And just a quick update on the figures from the escalation report. I think Philip gave you an update on the COVID booster, which is now at 62%. The last update we had on the flu vaccines was 43%. So that is also much higher as a consequence of mobile and roving units also doing vaccine boosters, etc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Subo.
Sorry, and the final figure, of course, is, and I don't know if Liz wants to say anything, was the patient experience issue that
sorry,
we
I do
at the beginning of this meeting. So clearly, lack of physical harm to a patient is an important outcome, but we are minded that we need to do more work to assure ourselves around the experience of our patients, and this fits very much with what we were discussing at the beginning of the meeting around delays and the public, sometimes not being as happy with us as we would like, and what that does to relationships with the responding staff or the staff on the end of the telephone. So we do need to do much more around patient experience. And I recognise that we're coming to the end of the year, but I'm hoping our next QPS in the new year we'll be having a formal paper on patient experience and actually working with the patient experience group to really get to grips with this. And I don't know, Liz, whether you have anything to comment on that.
I think I was just going to come back in and assure, obviously I was appointed mid-September with a specific focus on patient experience. So I have been following up with the patient experience group and the team, and a huge amount of work has already been done. It's just been sidelined due to the pandemic. So I think it will be ready to come back to the committee in the new year, and that we can build upon the work that's already been done and has been put into place.
Thank you. Harvey.
Yeah, thanks for the responses on the improving patient experience. The other thing I just wanted to raise was something that came up at our pre-meeting and relates to the community falls team. And we understand that some people have been trained around Crawley and Polegate, but what's actually happening and what progress is there, and when can we expect things to happen on the ground?
I know where non-executives have been asking questions about this. I mean, Philip, can you give an executive answer to this? I know this has been around for a while, as I say, this Community Falls project. There's a business case extent, I think. Currently,
there's various Community Falls projects.
This is the one around Polegate, around the sort of, is it Gatwick and Polegate? You say, Harvey?
Well, I heard Crawley and Polegate.
Crawley and Polegate.
But Crawley may mean Gatwick.
Yeah. So that there are some Community Falls projects already running. There are some that are still going through the safety and governance piece, and we're pushing those. But
can I ask Tom? Can we sort of working through you to Philip? Can I ask that we just give some focus onto this? I know there's one in particular, particularly relating to the Gatwick area thing, which seems to have been around for a while, and I don't know the full detail, but can we sort of find out what's going on and try and expedite it if possible, because it's one of the potential litigations to some of our category 3. delays, but I know there's various governance concerns and financial concerns around. It's not straightforward, but can we try and find out what's going on and try and get a timetable of implementation?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laurie.
I just wanted to say that one of the falls projects that's in the system is the one in Thanet with Age UK. And although it was delayed for a long time, I'm really pleased that the money has now gone over to Age UK in order to train non-clinical volunteers to support our staff when the clinical work is done. It's still, I think, to be finally completed because we now need a kind of referral path for our people out there to actually call Age UK and get the volunteers to support people who've fallen but now no longer need clinical work. So I'm very, very pleased that this project, after quite a lot of delay, is now underway. It should mean that it releases our staff to do other work rather than simply look after people in a parochial way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I see one other. Laurie, is that your hand I see raised, or I'm not able to. Is there another hand raised? I can't see whose hand it is.
It's mine, David. It's Vanessa's.
Hi, Vanessa. Come in, love. Great.
Sorry, Vanessa.
No, Laurie, that was absolutely, yeah, I was basically going to say that obviously to follow up, we are, I think, working with the third sector will be phenomenal moving forwards with the Community Guardians project. And as Laurie says, we are going to be moving forwards to activate a community guardian to go out to make sure that the paramedics and all our health clinical health providers do not spend time with people that don't need medical attention. And just on the point that Philip made earlier, in Thanet specifically, I'm working with the QEQM to try and help get people discharged safely. We're not CQC registered, but again, it is about sometimes it's just about making sure that people can access their house, get their shopping, put the lights on. And, I was at a meeting recently with a volume of people that weren't being able to discharge for just simple discharges. So I think working with the third sector is going to be the way forward. And I'm really looking forward to starting the Community Guardian project and getting the referral pathway up and running. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. And thank you, Vanessa, for your patience and diligence with this, because it is important in communities. Thank you indeed. Can I move us on? I can't see other hands raised. We've got the reports on finance and investment and the Audit Committee, but both of these items are features in deep dives. So really, it's just if there's any headline items, we're going to go into their work in a lot more detail after the comfort break. So is there any headlines, Howard and Michael, you wanted to raise now at all? Howard, in terms of, we got the minutes there of 2 meetings.
Not really, no. Any questions, but most of it is, as you say, I'm going to cover later on.
Yeah, thank you. And similarly, Michael from the Audit Committee.
Just one point I would raise, and that is where we had partial assurance about business continuity, and to give some assurance to the council, what does that mean? So business continuity plans are in place. I think the issue is because of COVID, they haven't necessarily been tested to the degree that we would like. But to give assurance that we have the Epr assessment that is coming to the board in January. To explain the abbreviation, this is around the readiness of the trust to respond to incidents of similar gravity and nature that happened in Manchester and others. So just to give assurance to the council that the non-executives are very much onto this, as ensuring that the trust readiness is there. And that's the only one I would draw particular attention to, Chair.
Thank you. And the chairman of the North West region has shared some insights with me after the Manchester, as part of the Manchester inquiry, which can be very helpful as well in terms of us getting make sure we're appropriately governed in this area. There's a governor observation report as well from the Audit Committee. Can we receive that? I'm not sure who attended from the governors, the Audit Committee, but hopefully you came away suitably assured.
think it was Harvey, Chair.
Harvey? Harvey, is anything you want to add about your report, the observation report?
No, the report covers it. It was fine.
Thank you. Right, now then, we're 10 minutes behind schedule, but hope you feel it's important matters that we've been talking about. Can I suggest that we reconvene after a comfort break, 11:37. Give you 10 minutes to refresh yourselves and come back renewed for the second part of the meeting when we go into matters of audit and finance. It's important matters. One of the important jobs of the council is appointing our external auditors, and we're very pleased that KPMG produce our annual audit report and act as the Trust's external auditors. So we have in attendance today Ben Lazarus, who's the lead external auditor for CCAM from KPMG. So the important part in the council year, Ben. So you're going to explain to us about your role, the role of the auditor, and present the annual report to us as well. And we have some new members today, so your attendance is timely. So over to you, sir.
Lovely. I don't know if someone's going to put some slides up on the screen, but I'll start talking. I think it's come around in the pack, but someone did mention they were going to try and put the slides on screen so I could talk to them in front of everyone. But I will. I'll start talking and I'll see if they pop up. So. Yes, lovely to be here and lovely to meet lots of you for the first time. Our role as external auditors, I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit, talk about headlines from our work, and then just go into a little bit more detail about the kind of two-pronged elements of our work, because some of our work is around looking at your financial statements, making sure they add up correctly, making sure that there is adequate support for the numbers in there, and we particularly focus on some key risk areas in there, areas that are particularly judgmental. For example, the valuation of land and buildings. It's a big number and it's got a methodology behind it which is quite complicated, so we focus in on that work. But the other area of our work is around value for money, and making sure that the trust has adequate arrangements in place to secure appropriate value for money in everything that it does. So I don't know if we want to just go on to slide 2 there, but slide 2 just gives a little bit more detail about those headlines and specifically our responsibilities. So just to be really clear, our responsibility as your auditors is to sound what we call a true and fair opinion on your financial statements, and to ensure that everything in the annual report, the whole document, all of the narrative sections that lead into the numbers, include everything that it should. So we get guidelines from the regulators around the NHS that say we want an annual report that CCAM produce to include all of these different disclosures. One of the things we do is check against that to make sure that there's nothing missing, but we also check the validity and the appropriateness of those disclosures, and then the numbers. NHS Improvement want us to report to the governors, and that's why we're here today, and that's why I'll talk about our auditor's annual report document, which is on your website, and a new document this year. And we also want to give governors the opportunity to raise challenges, questions, understand our work and understand the process more. So that's kind of why I'm here today, and happy to take questions at the end. Before I go into those kind of the two headlines in the box there below, I would just say, it's hard to avoid jargon in an external audit world, and if I go into that, apologies. I would say there's a couple of headlines from me that aren't kind of noted there but are really important. It was a very smooth audit this year. So the audit to 31st of March 2021, that financial year, was a smooth audit. We haven't had to raise any significant issues. There's nothing material in the items that we raised to management or the audit committee. And the audit opinion, i.e. the sort of the thing that we slot into your annual report and accounts that says our kind of overall conclusions, was a true and fair opinion. It was unqualified, so we didn't have to make any qualifications or modifications to the usual opinion we would want to raise, and that's about as good as it gets in terms of external audit world. I'd also say the dialogue and the communications with the finance team led by David, but also kind of the much kind of deeper, kind of more junior members of the team, all was really smooth, and it was always a positive dialogue throughout the process. So there's just a couple of kind of key points overlaying everything I say today that I think are really important to note. Where did our conclusions land? As I say, around financial statements, we issued an unqualified opinion, which is the right sort of opinion that you'd want to hear. We checked the amounts that you spent and were owed, and we looked at what we call your statement of financial position and your income and expenditure statement and all of the notes that support that. And again, you know, nothing material or significant that we had to raise in concluding on an unqualified opinion. We also looked at value for money in a lot more detail this year than we have done in previous years. That was because NHSI particularly brought in new requirements this year that they wanted external auditors to be doing more in this area to provide better assurances that what you do with your money is appropriate. And really importantly, the arrangements that you have in place around financial sustainability, around governance, and around securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness of your use of resources are adequate. So it's about those arrangements, it's about those people, and it's about those processes that are in place behind doing what you do. So we had a whole audit program that we went into that was aligned to what NHSI were asking us to look at. We went through that in lots of diligent detail. We looked at lots of documents, we spoke to lots of people. And again, there's a whole load of work that gets to us saying, we got to a conclusion where we could say there were no significant weaknesses. Again, that is the most positive conclusion we are able to give around value for money, and it's a clean opinion. So again, we can't be more flowery in our language than that because it's quite binary in what the opinions we have to give. But that's a really good conclusion, particularly in a year where we've done an awful lot of work around value for money and really kicked the tires. If we just go on to the next slide, it just sort of gives you a little bit more detail. And I know you've had this in the pack, so I won't labour any of these points, but just gives you a little bit more detail around our financial statements part of our work. So not the value for money bit, but the financial statements part of the work. We did, as it says in the top left box there, identify two or three what we call audit adjustments through the process. So from the date of getting the first set of draft accounts, there were a small number of changes between that first draft and that final draft. But I'm pleased to say that none of those items were what we would deem material. So we set a materiality, we agree that with the Audit and Risk Committee at the start of the year. None of them were material. They were all well below that materiality threshold. However, they were above a secondary threshold we have, which is what we call our reporting threshold. Management therefore, decided, look, we want to make those adjustments. None of them were particularly, as I say, material or significant, but it's worth noting that there was an iterative process there and management dealt with those points well. What else? The annual report was a really good quality annual report draft, and the processes that go on behind the scenes with the Audit Committee and with management were really stellar in making sure that by the time we got a version of that document, yes, we found typos here and there or little bits and pieces that we suggested sharpening on, but really nothing material or significant in that review. At the bottom there in that box, it just sort of highlights some of the numbers for you. So, and some of what we call our kind of significant risks around the audit area. So these are different from maybe the trust strategic risks, but they're areas of focus for us that either we have to look at as part of our auditing standards. So recognition of income and the risk of fraudulent expenditure recognition, I want to be clear, are absolutely standard risks that we include on every trust audit across the sector. There's nothing specific to CCAM that made us go, oh, wait a minute, we need to heighten that risk for you as an organisation. And as you can see from the conclusions around those 2 points, there were no significant issues identified across any of those areas. So lots of sample testing, lots of kind of getting into the detail of your income and expenditure transactions, particularly those around the year end where they could slip into the wrong period or people could nudge them one way or another. Nothing at all untoward that we identified around those areas. And as I alluded to before, valuation of land and buildings, as you can see there, £38 million across land and buildings. There is quite a complex methodology which goes in behind that, to which the trust gets support from an external valuer. Again, I could go on for days about that because it is really complex, but nothing that we had to bring to anyone's attention around the assumptions used, the methodology used in terms of kind of coming to those values, and nothing in terms of kind of the overall kind of material accuracy of that we had to bring to the attention. We were absolutely comfortable from a material level with those numbers. If we just go on to my penultimate slide then around value for money, this just sort of splits it down a little bit into the different areas. We did a risk assessment around both financial sustainability, governance and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. These are the sort of subtitle areas that we've worked with regulators on to sort of say, look, here's what we're going to look into. We've got a series of procedures that sit under each of these. We did a risk assessment that we presented to the Audit Committee around each of these at the sort of start of our process. We didn't think there was anything from that risk assessment that was particularly heightened risk in the year. We then went and completed all of our relevant procedures, looking at documents, speaking to the right people, not just in the finance team, across clinical parts of the trust, operational parts of the trust. And again, as it says under that little table with the green in it, we raised a couple of housekeeping points around kind of tightening up documentation on things, but really kind of good practice points around how you can keep improving. Nothing that creates what we would say a significant weakness or issue around value for money. So that's a really positive result, and I'd just pause on that for 1 second and sort of, you know, think about what that really means. And finally, on this point, Auditors annual report, alongside the new requirements for value for money this year, we were asked to produce a sort of new and refreshed report that goes on the Trust website and has been published on the Trust website, which summarises some of the work around financial statements, but also really gives some detail around the value for money piece, and not just says, oh, we raised these 2 recommendations around housekeeping, but says lots of the really positive stuff we identified, strong governance arrangements in place, lots of really well documented decision making where things were about value for money in the background, and a whole host of other positives that we were able to make about you as a trust, particularly when we benchmark you against others. So that's a document that's published and is on the Trust website. And again, I would really note there's some kind of positive points in there. I think that my final slide is just, you know, my contact details. Conscious there's quite a lot there, and some of it is quite technical, and hopefully I've tried to avoid jargon, but there's both me, I'm the director with the team, there's Fleur Niebuhr, who's the partner, who Michael and lots of kind of people on this call will have seen at audit committees. But, you know, conscious you may have questions now, but if you do, of course, have any questions that you want to ping to us after today or ask, we're more than happy to discuss with you after the meeting. I think I'll pause there. I've probably gone on for long enough, and I don't want to get behind.
Ben, thank you. That was really well explained. Thank you, and I really appreciate the way you put that across to the council this morning. So, colleagues, we've got Ben available there. He's give you a summary of the trust's external audit reports. I think what's the important thing is he looks at all of the trust activities. It's not just looking at the money; it's looking at the way we govern ourselves. There's a really important. It's a really important opinion, particularly when we're under so much scrutiny, under so much pressure regarding our service. Behind the scenes, it's showing that, you know, there's a good governance structure and things are working in CCAM in spite of our challenges. So, colleagues, is there anything you wanted to ask questions about regarding the reports, or do you take assurance from it? I take assurance that. I'm not seeing any hands raised, but seeing lots of positive signals from non-verbal signals from my council, which is one of the downsides of working remotely. But I do think Brian wants to make a point. Brian,
it was just to say that, as I know, we have in our NEDs some pretty good people who are used to audit and whatever. As a council member representing the public with a background in finance, I just want to congratulate the team. That is one of the cleanest audits I've ever heard of or been involved in, and with all that's been going on in the background, and there's lots of areas where we need to see assurance, but that is a credit to what's been achieved. That's all, Chair.
Okay, well, that's our thanks to your thanks to the company secretary and also the director of finance and the finance team. Thank you for that. Can we conclude on that item then? So, Ben, if we can say warmly thank you for the report. Our best wishes to Fleur and for a clean audit opinion in 2022. So, we wish you all the best. So, thanks you.
Thanks for having me. That's really good. Thank you.
Waiting a bit. Have a good day. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Right, let's move on now. We got our sort of deep dives, as it were, into the work of board committees. So we've got the Audit Committee and the Finance and Investment Committee. So is it appropriate to start with the Audit Committee, Michael? You can tend to.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that, and I have a few slides that if Lee could put those up for me, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, or Katie. Sorry, Katie. Thank you. So if we could go into the first slide and then, sorry, the second one, my apologies. Yeah, I just wanted to, for lay members of the council who not particularly come across audit committees before, I just wanted to give a bit of background to what we do. So fundamentally, we are around giving assurance to the board and the executive that the organisation has good financial control, it manages risk effectively, it delivers value for money, and that this is reflected in the Trust's annual report and financial statements. It also goes wider than that. We're about propriety and proper conduct of public business and compliance with the Nolan principles. So without elevating this committee to above its station, I'd say that to some extent we are the conscience. We're around ensuring that we do everything as best as we can. We don't just rely on what the executive tell us. We have a number of ways in which we get assurance, which is totally independent of the executive. Our external auditors, as you've just heard from, appointed through competition, totally independent, operate within their own standards and with their own regulator. And we have internal audit and our fraud service, both of which are outsourced to RSM, so they are independent. The other thing that I'd say is the composition of the audit committee is quite unique in some respects, because while I chair it, I'm very fortunate to have as members the chairs of all of the other subcommittees of the board, patient safety, workforce, finance and performance. So what that means is that we're able to come together and give a cross-trust perspective of the organisation's performance. We met 5 times in 2021. And I'm very keen to focus on how we work. Of course, we challenge the executive, but we challenge hopefully in a way that is constructive. And what really we are about is promoting continuous improvement in the way in which the trust operates. If I could go on to the next slide, please. Some of the key highlights for 2021, you've already heard we had a clear audit opinion covering both financial and value for money. That is really, really important in giving assurance to you that we're making the best use of our resources on behalf of the communities that we serve, and we've got high standards of propriety. Philip, as Chief Executive, is the accounting officer. That's a terminology that's been in existence now for 100 years, but it basically places on him responsibilities to ensure that the trust is well managed, makes best use of public money, as I've just said, and he gets annual assurance from the work of internal audit, and again that was very positive. You've seen the performance report where a number of governors have asked questions on. As the audit committee, we have been promoting improvements in that performance report. It's getting better, still further to go, but that's very much where we are focused. Risk, really, really important in ensuring that the trust performs well. We continue to review the risk register. We make recommendations about how it could continue to improve. What we're very focused on there is ensuring that the risk register is sufficiently comprehensive, it's joined up, we understand the interdependencies. Information governance, we hold information on patients that we support and other information that is of a private nature. We are governed by a whole range of regulations set by the NHS and government in general, and we need to be confident that the CCAM is complying with these. We get an annual information governance report that we can review and ask questions on. Fraud, we still can see continual improvements. I think CCAM has got a good track record in comparison with other NHS bodies in the way in which it has a fraud prevention strategy in place. And we have been very keen not just to focus on the individual issues that have arisen, but to actually draw out systemic issues, and I'll talk about those in a little while. If I could go on to the third slide, please. This just gives you a little bit of a focus of some of the work that we've done. So you can see the item of focus, and the important thing here is it's not just about financial issues. Of course, as chair of the audit committee, my one priority is to ensure that we have an appropriate control environment in place, and that's why the work on payroll, data security is key to that. But we're also interested in getting assurance that CCAM is delivering good quality care for those whom we serve. And we're also interested in people issues. And you'll see there freedom to speak up, review of that, and other aspects where we are particularly concerned that the information that we're getting demonstrates to us that CCAM is a good place to work and CCAM's people are well looked after. Now, where there's reasonable assurance, we may not focus that much. We may focus on learning the lessons that might be replicated elsewhere. Where there is partial assurance, that's where the Audit Committee will continue to monitor the implementations of recommendations that the internal auditors have made. So we've been very much focused on clinical education, as Laurie referred to, freedom to speak up. And I'm very grateful because while the Audit Committee can take a high-level review as to the extent to which the Trust is responding appropriately to recommendations, it is the subcommittees of the board, like workforce, like clinical, like patient safety, that look at implementation in much more detail and provide the assurance to the full board. If I could go on to my last slide, please, very quickly. Now, it would be unrealistic to think that every organisation is perfect. It's never perfect. There will always be areas that internal audit, external audit highlight where we can do better. Now, for me, the real success of the Audit Committee is it is a real engine to help support the executive deliver better and to focus on long-term improvement. And what I wanted to highlight here is that from our work, from our collective knowledge as chairs of the various committees, I think over the last year and before that, we've been able to focus on what I call the systemic issues, that if we get those right, we can be ensured that CCAM will continue to improve. Now, one of the first things that I highlight is resilience. What COVID has demonstrated to us that while the NHS has responded very well, our resilience, like a lot of the NHS, could be improved. And that's why we've very much supported the executive through the Better by Design. And you'll hear more about this over the next month, which is really about how do you reconfigure many of the things that CCAM do to ensure that in the longer term, we are more resilient. We've commented as an audit committee that there tends to be a focus on the short term. This is not unique to this organisation. I think it's a systemic issue across the wider NHS, partly relates to the funding model. But what we're trying to do is encourage the executive to take a longer term perspective. And what I'm pleased to say is that the recently formed performance cell that is trying to use the data that we have to take a much wider, longer term perspective so that we're better prepared to anticipate issues around performance and deal with them before they get out of hand. Leadership, a lot of time for the executive. I think leadership is an issue for most organisations, and many of the reports that internal audit have brought to us would suggest that sometimes leadership could be a little bit better, and under David Astley's chairmanship, we are now very much focusing on board development and management development. People engagement, I think my colleagues on the other committees have focused on this before, and I think it's come from questions, particularly from Marcia. And what we're saying around Better by Design is that will only be successful if we really engage with CCAM people, that CCAM people feel that as we continue to improve the organisation, they have a role to play in drawing on good practice, and it's not done to them, it's done with them. We also focused on data. CCAM is a wonderful organisation. It has so much information at its disposal, but sometimes you can't always see the wood from the trees, and we very much support the appointment of the new Executive Director of Business and Business Development, who comes with a proven expertise in how you translate data into effective management information. And that's very much what he is focusing on. And a systemic issue that's come out quite significantly over the last year is the performance of clinical education. Laurie referred to that, and there is a new strategy being developed. So again, I think the executive are responding to this issue, and we need to monitor how well that is implemented. And then finally, we've highlighted the fact about sustainability. We all know with the recent COP conference that this is a real issue of concern to most of us in the communities in which we live and work. I think CCAM is a good story to tell about sustainability, but it's not that visible. So in the Audit Committee, we are asking the question, are you actually demonstrating to the outside world sufficiently effectively that sustainability matters? So, Chair and Council, what I've tried to give you there is that the Audit Committee is not just focused on transaction, it's trying to draw out key issues where CCAM can continue to improve. I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was an excellent report. Thank you. Really clear and set out as a benchmark, as a standard for audit action in the trust. So, Council, do you have any questions of Michael's reports? I hope you're going to take. There's considerable comfort to take, but I think hopefully what you also get is that is the appropriate scrutiny of items and checking, and there's a real balance there between sort of looking at the present but also with an eye on the future.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll take silent. Thank you, Michael. That really is very helpful in terms of, and I think we need to capture the essence of that. It's also very useful in terms of the future, presenting the trust in a good light to others, particularly regulators, about the approach that we're taking in managing our affairs. So I think that was a very good synopsis of what you said there about the way we need to conduct ourselves going forward as well. So thank you. Can we move on now to the Finance Committee and Howard as chair?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So likewise, what I've tried to do is assimilate and pick up some of the key points of the Finance Committee. So they're divided into three areas. First of all, I'm going to cover the sort of structure and governance and purpose for the benefit of the new governors. Secondly, I'm going to look at the sort of key highlights, improvements that we reviewed in the FIC. And then thirdly, I'm going to look at the sort of key ongoing challenges where we will be looking for further assurance going forward. So first of all, then, the structure and governance in the pack is the terms of reference, and that includes the purpose. So I think the purpose remains relevant and I think is fairly standard, and I'll just run through that. So the purpose of the committee is to acquire and scrutinise assurances that the Trust's system of internal controls relating to finance, corporate services and investments in future operational capability are designed appropriately and operating effectively. So that's the purpose, as I say. I think that remains valid and relevant. It has in the past picked up, however, the sort of operational performance and also IT and digital. Now, as you may be aware, that the sort of operational performance aspect of the business has had its challenges and came to occupy quite a substantial part of the agenda of the FIC, and hence from August this year we split out the operational performance review into the Performance Committee. So earlier in the year it covered operational performance. It now does not, because that's covered by a separate committee. In other points regarding the terms of reference, which I think are still okay, Lucy Bloom obviously resigned or left the organisation, and we now have Paul Brocklehurst, who has joined the committee in her place. So we've basically got to have David Hammond in his new role, but as Director of Finance, Fiona Moore and Emma Williams. And We have obviously myself, Michael Whitehouse and Paul Brocklehurst as the committee members. The cycle of business is also set out in the pack, which sets out the main areas of focus, and those are in addition to the regular reviews of the financial results available at the time, and of course proposed investments via business cases that are presented to the committee, and those are then reviewed for approval and recommendation to the board for approval. I think we met at least 6 times, and we had a couple of extraordinary meetings to look at specific business cases as well during the year. In terms of then highlights, unless there's anything on that, highlights of improvements over the year. From the actual financial results point of view, we are in line with plan. So for September, particularly for the half-year results, were there or thereabouts, slightly better actually than plan, which was a £5 million deficit, which we'll come on to look at. And indeed, the forecast for the full year is a £9.6 million deficit, albeit that that's slightly better than the planned £10.6 million deficit. There are swings and roundabouts, as you'd expect, within those results, but broadly, we're on line with plan and forecasting slightly better by the year end. As mentioned in one of the reports, we did see at the FIC the plan for the ICS overall position, which was a balanced position. What that implies, of course, is that if we've got a deficit, then somebody else has got a surplus, certainly in the plan, and that proved to be the case. I don't recall exactly how that was split, but there are surpluses to balance the deficits, and that therein lies a potential issue, which I'll come on to. The other aspects, improvements or whatever, COVID-19, we were concerned earlier in the year about the continuity of funding, and that was resolved. As I say, it was a concern, and indeed, in the second half, we're expecting funding of a further £8.6 million, so that has continued to come through. That's actually slightly better than our forecast of costs for COVID-19, but that concern was allayed, and that has continued. As we mentioned earlier on in the meeting, we've had some additional funding from the winter stresses of 4.3 million for 999 and 6.8 million for the 111. So those have helped our position for the full year. As I say, overall, broadly in line with plan, just a bit better. The other point that's been covered also by Michael is, the concern of the FIC was around the continuing challenges of the operation performance. For even pre-COVID-19, we sort of continued to operate without the resilience that was necessary, and COVID-19 has obviously made that worse. And that we are very pleased to see the sort of development and evolvement, if you like, of the transformation project now known as Better by Design, to address some of the deeper issues concerning those operation performance challenges. So we are, very excited by that program. There are risks associated with it, as any program, but I think the recognition that there needs to be some deeper review of the operating model has been recognised and is now well established for that project. So that's really, really positive. The estates programme remains a real positive for the organisation. So Brighton MRC obviously went live very successfully. And then we've got Medway and Banstead projects well on their way. So that's a real positive for the organisation. In the digital arena, we've seen the implementation of the e-timesheets and the new fleet information system, all of which remove paper inputs and enable input through tablets, and that should improve the reliability and speed of and efficiency of the organisation. So some really strong developments there, and that's obviously in addition to the electronic patient care record, which is well embedded already. And we'll have some post-implementation reviews of some of those key projects as well. But overall, really positive movements forward for the organisation. We've also touched on, as part of the Better by Design, the internal integrated planning. So one of the concerns that certainly I had when I came across this was earlier on, what was referred to as the demand and capacity reviews, which have now been overtaken by this, were run externally, which was rather strange for me to see that something so fundamental to the business was actually run by consultants. So a huge step forward here that that internal planning, integrated planning, led by David, now is a great improvement for the organisation in terms of that demand planning, as well as the whole forecasting and scenario planning, which was referred to as the performance cell, part of the Better by Design project. Also, CAS 111 implementation has had some challenges, but overall that has received some extra funding, and I think can be viewed as a great success for the organisation to have implemented that, despite its challenges. Obviously, it's not ideal to launch a project like that right in the middle of COVID-19, but we did, and despite that, it has been successful. So overall, a lot of that, some really good, strong positives to report over the year that we've reviewed and the business has delivered. So moving into the third area then are the key ongoing challenges, where we will continue to look at seeking further assurance. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier on, the overall deficit position is of concern. I believe it was set up as a sort of quirk of the original block funding that we received, and the fact that we are sitting on a deficit of what looks to be something like 10 million, as I say, that has not been resolved as such for 21-22 with the ICS, i.e. it looks like that's the position is going to remain. What that means, let's be clear about it, that means that we are funding a deficit of £9.6 million. Now, we happen to be in a very strong financial position at the moment, particularly with some funding for Medway or whatever that hasn't been spent. So we're sitting on the best part of £40 million. We happen to be in a position where we can fund that shortfall, but that is not sustainable, absolutely not sustainable. And so that issue needs to be resolved going forward. There are other, challenges in terms of next year, 22-23. But if we start with a deficit position of that size, that is, I would say, an unsustainable position. So that needs to be sorted out. That's a matter of resolving that with the ICS to secure appropriate funding. As I mentioned, in terms of other ongoing challenges, obviously operational performance remains an ongoing challenge, and that will be picked up by the Performance Committee, as I mentioned. And then a couple of other points on the better by design. That there's a slight danger that we become to regard that as a panacea for everything. And of course, it is a major project or major program of projects. And we need to monitor very carefully the governance and the delivery of that. And as Michael mentioned, the engagement of the whole organisation around that project, which sounds like we've already got some challenges there to make sure everybody's picked up and engaged in that programme of works. Obviously, some of the governance will be picked up directly by the board as well as reviewed by the FIC. And then finally, on the ongoing challenges, also mentioned earlier on the digital side, is just a watching brief on that recent critical incident and the recommendations coming out of that, that we will need to make or seek assurance around those being implemented effectively. So that's really the report from the Finance and Investment Committee.
Thank you. Very, very comprehensive. And also thank you for your leadership of that committee. It's very positive messages there, as well as awareness of our ongoing risks going forward. So I think I'm very grateful for your insight there. So colleagues, any questions of the chairman of the Finance Committee or Chris? Hi there, Chris. Chris Burton. You're on mute, Chris. Chris, you're on mute. Chris, you're on mute. You're on mute, Chris. Can we?
Chris, we literally can't hear anything you just said. You're still on mute. Please, could you unmute yourself and start again? Thank you.
Apologies. Thanks for.
Oh, we didn't stay through there, Chris. Get yourself back into the mode again, and we'll all sit attentively.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Howard. It's a very comprehensive statement you made there. Just a big hit. How confident are the Finance Committee and the boards that the ICS will pick up the £9.6 million deficit for 22-23?
I can't really answer that question. I'm not in a position close enough to the ICS. I think it's a question for David and/or Philip. All we can do is to make sure we raise it at the right level, i.e., at the ICS, to resolve it. But clearly it hasn't been resolved for the current year. Perhaps the most important thing is that it's resolved going forward, even if it's not for the current year. I don't know if Philip wants to.
Yeah, Philip,
no, I think you've said it, Howard. I think that's spot on.
In terms of relationships, though, with the, I'll bring in Laurie in a moment. In relation to the relationships with the ICS, Chris, I think it's really important. I mean, I think, hats off to Philip and David, our Chief Financial Officer, and the executive team. They have worked diligently over the last 3 years to build relationships up with the NHS. Whilst the landscape changes in terms of NHS organisations, the principle remains the same. We're delivering the service and others are commissioning it. And we have to have a relationship with them, particularly those that hold the purse strings that fund our activities. So it's really important we have a constructive relationship, and I think we have got that. I spend a lot of time on relationship building with, as do my colleague non-execs increasingly in contact with other non-execs as well in the community. And one good thing about the IC, the emerging integrated care systems, they all intend to have some form of NED forum, where it's an opportunity for my colleagues who live in certain geographical areas, be Kent, Surrey and Sussex, to relate to the local ICS, which I think is going to be important. Laurie has represented me, for instance, in some meetings in Kent because of geography, but also because of some subjects that were relevant for Laurie to be at the meeting. So that's been very positive. So we've done all our best to build up a relationship. Obviously, the proof's going to be in terms of, let's get down to where's the money then, and when it gets to the discussions, Chris. And all I could say is, through the stewardship of the Director of Finance, but also with the oversight from my colleagues, we are watching the finances and how we run the organisation with a lot of detail, because quite frankly we need credibility, and I think we're reasonably credible now compared to where we were as an organisation, and that makes such a difference in the discussions. But there's a challenge ahead, and I think Howard is right to just lay down that risk. There's a risk there. We've got to manage it.
Just a quick thank you to Philip for outlining and alluding to the future. Looks quite bright with regard to the relationship with the ICS directorships and how they're going to choose that relationship to go forward. So thanks very much, Philip. Yeah.
No, we've got to. We're not at every meeting because we physically can't be there, Chris. But you know, we've made it known to all of the leaders of the ICS is we are an equal member of the ICS community, of the health service community in the South East, and we'll have as much say as a hospital trust or a community trust or mental health trust. We're there at the same, and that's the important thing that we want to get across to colleagues. Laurie, you want to come in?
I just wanted to make the point. I mean, I think the level of engagement that Philip and colleagues and you, David, have made in terms of the ICS is really, really valuable and to be congratulated. I think it's just worth remembering all the time that we are part of 4 ICSs, and so the squabbling about money as it gets tighter is going to be very, very complicated. It's not as if we have a single, although we might have technically a single commissioner behind them of 4 ICSs who might have differences of opinion about how both capital and revenue is spent. So I think our execs and David particularly have got quite a hectic time in front of them as the roles of ICSs become clearer.
Thank you, Laurie. That's why I'm making the point that we can't do it on our own, and that's why my non-executives increasingly, based on their geographical locations, will join. I'll be encouraging them to join in the non-executive discussions, which will be where the opinions are formed. The non-executives are being appointed now for the ICS, for the systems, and part of the emerging landscape going forward will be some non-executive forums to at least be a way of influencing in a softer way than more formal management discussions. So I'm very, very positive about that, and I know my colleagues are raring to go, quite frankly, to get involved in those discussions when they can. So any other questions, colleagues, on the finances, financial structure, governance? Hopefully then, if there aren't any more comments, we bring the meeting to a close. Just to summarise that point, hopefully you can take some comfort from the report, both of the Audit Committee Chair, but also the Finance Committee Chair, but also Howard's Performance Committee Chair as well. That from a governance point of view, we have got the finance and the way the trust is governed in very clear line of sight, and the non-executives are appropriately involved in that, but the main work is obviously clearly down to the executives, and Philip is the accountable officer. It's not the non-executives, it's the chief executive, but I think hopefully he feels he's got appropriate support from non-executives to make sure the organisation is well governed. So that's where the background, and there are clearly risks going forward, which I think we've outlined to you, that my colleagues have outlined that to you, and I think we've got our eyes are open on the challenges to the future as well. Okay, so let's, if we may, move on then to any urgent items, any other business. Anything to people wish to raise? Thank you. I'm not sure how many members of the public have been gracious not to give us their time this morning to listen into our discussions, but are there any questions from the public or from the membership generally on the business of this agenda? So things they want to talk about, they've heard on relating to this morning's meeting. I see one hand raised there. Marcia, come in.
Not me this time.
I apologise. I just saw Em and I just assumed it was Martin Grant. Hi, Martin. Did I see that correctly, Katie?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Martin, you just need to turn your camera on and unmute your microphone so you can ask your question.
The classical mistake with the inexperienced team user. So yes. Hello.
Hi, Martin. Nice to meet you, Martin. One of our newly elected governors. Nice to meet you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Just as context of what I'm going to ask, up until a couple of years ago, I worked for the London Ambulance Service, and I was looking through the Integrated Performance Report, looking for job cycle time. Now, I can see there's obviously a big issue at the moment is around hospital turnaround, but I apologise if there's nothing, if I've missed it and there is something about job cycle time in there. But if not, I wondered why it wasn't included, given the significance of the whole job cycle chain to both performance and staff welfare. I mean, job cycles are balloon, so you squeeze hospital turnaround and you get bulges elsewhere, like on scene time as people need to complete PRFs. And in terms of welfare, I mean, you've got this statistic of 53.3% 999 late finishes. What we found in London was that kind of statistics like that drove behaviours in the last hour, which really caused problems in terms of performance at shift handover. So going back, question to, is it there? If not, why not? And how does whatever it is now compare to whatever targets you may have set for it?
Okay, thank you, Marcel. That's a really good question. I think I'm not sure whether I'll ask just Philip to give a comment on that. There's job cycle time, particularly was the first point that Martin raised, and how do we track that?
Hi, Martin, and welcome. Yeah, really important area of business, because every minute we can take off the job cycle time is the equivalent to about 6 paramedics added to the workforce, and we measure it we break it down into minute chunks, as I'm sure they do in London, and we measure each piece of it, and we monitor it in our performance improvement plan, and that's which is presented every week to the executive. Without carefully looking, I can't see where it's covered in the documents that we present to this board, but we can easily add that. Peter's got his hand up.
Can we log that? It's an important item. Peter?
Yeah, Chairman, so just to say, there are 2 indicators in the IPR that cover job cycle time. One's the clear at scene, one's clear at hospital. It's on the top of the effective dashboard.
Right. Okay. But I think we're taking Martin's lead. I think perhaps in the Performance Committee we'll just give some attention to that, because we know our crews are delayed at scene because of other aspects of having to get callbacks from primary care practitioners or other aspects of the social care system. So we know there's that can be, job cycle time is a challenge to efficiency, and so we'll make sure that's brought out in the features and discussions, Martin. Thank you. And the other point you referred to was shift overruns and the impact that has on sort of end of shift behaviours. Philip, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's no surprise that it's no different here than it was than you would have known in London. We try and protect shift overruns, because they're bad for everybody, and they're bad for the staff member, they're bad for the business, and often they're bad for patients. But I'm pleased to say that's not very often. So the protection that we give it through our policies is also something that we're having to look very closely at as part of our sustainability work, because we are restricting who can see what patients to a very large degree, to protect the end of shift arrangements, and we need to check whether that's the balance is right in that, and we're doing that under Better by Design.
Thank you. I'm going to say, Philip, part of the Better by Design programme is to look at one of the drivers is crew welfare, is things like shift overruns, and make sure they get access to meal breaks, etc. And that's all part of the overall package of efficiency we're trying to bring about, Martin, or the executive are trying to bring about. Thank you for the question. Tom?
It's just to follow on from Martin raised the impact this is all having on people and well-being, and just to say, Martin, we had, I think, Philip and team presented in the IPR at our last board meeting, there are 21 areas that we measure that relate to staff well-being, and actually late finishes, meal breaks, all those sort of things are part of that. So we keep an eye through the WWC, the Workforce and Wellbeing Committee, as well as at full board on these things.
Thank you. If I can see no other hands raised, so what I just quickly would like to do now is under item 61.21. I've just made a note of sort of key items that the council are asking that my executive colleagues and myself keep a close eye on, and I know Katie and team will have taken their detailed records of the meeting, but the headlines I got is obviously continued interest around public affairs management and our approach to corporate affairs. The sort of Marcia's extremely well made point regarding implementation of agile working, reviewing where we are, particularly as the COVID emergency continues to drag on, and looks like we'll be working remotely for some time yet, and particularly the impact of that on corporate departments and the staff in them. So I thought that was again an important point. We must not forget the staff who provide the support to all the people that work in the front line of EOC and on the road. Obviously, performance continues to be of appropriate interest to the council, and something which I hope you've got some comfort that the non-executive directors I've got a grasp of in detail in working with the executive. I've got the Falls project and continued interest in Falls projects. We noted the positive developments in Thanet, but we want to see them expedited, and we also have the emerging Falls project in the Gatwick area in particular. We also want to see the council would like the non-executives to pay particular attention to. Clinical education is an important matter. That's again is I think I've certainly got messages from the council that continued diligence from non-execs in making sure we can continue the improvements in clinical education. The whole support work that we're doing to make CCAM more financially sustainable, that's come out in the finance and audit reports, and the latter 2 points feed into that as well, around job cycle time and shift overruns are all part of the overall efficiency measure. So are there any other items, council, you wish the non-executives to take any more particular attention to based on what we shared with you today? Content with that as a reasonable summary. So we've got a good note. Okay, move on to meeting effectiveness. We've slightly run over, but are you content? You've all had your say. That fee in a favour. People have spoken up. Okay, thank you for that. So before we conclude completely, can I just really just thank a number of colleagues who this might well be their last meeting. So Nikki Pointer, I know is not here, but has served as the lead governor and has been a great support. So Nikki Pointer, Marcia, who has contributed greatly to this meeting, Chris Devereux, Harvey Nash, Waz Shakir, and Nigel Wilmot Coles. This is their last council meeting. So on behalf of us all, and particularly the trust board as well, can we say thank you to them for their diligence over their term of office and the respectful way in which they've raised matters in the spirit of partnership, and that's been really appreciated. And that they're still with us at the end of February, but say this is their last meeting. Thank you again for what you've all contributed to the meeting, particularly those departing. But again, I hope the new members who have been observing today have got a flavour of our business, and particularly the contribution which the governors made to the overall governance of the trust. So we can now conclude the meeting. So meeting effectiveness, you've all had your say, you said, and we meet again on the 3rd of March at 10 a.m. So thank you for your help.